Hey guys, and welcome to a brand new video on how to choose your first team in King's Raid. So, choosing your first team is a very important decision in King's Raid. The game limits the number of resources you get early on, such as fragments, gold, and rubies, and forces you to try and focus on a certain set of heroes. Now, of course, you can feel free to switch out these heroes at any point and exchange them for different heroes, or a new DPS, a new tank, whatever. But every time you do this, you are setting yourself back by the amount of fragments and gold that you've invested in the previous hero. If you have Klaus as your tank and you get him to 4 or 5 star, and then decide you want to switch to Jane, then you now have to get Jane up to 4 or 5 star, just like Klaus. You have to invest skill books into her, so you're really going to be missing out on progression if you decide to retool your team. Which is why, unless you're a whale, it's a good idea to pick your first team and kind of stick with them until they're at a level where they can farm enough fragments, enough skill books, and enough experience to start raising other members of the team. So with that in mind, choosing your first team really boils down to the decision on whether you want to make a magical or a physical team. There are 2 types of teams in King's Raid. I mean, there's more, but there's 2 main types of teams: magical teams and physical teams. Magical teams are the kings early. They dominate the early levels. Enemies have much lower magic resistance, especially in Chapter 6, and with the exception of Chapter 5, a magical team is much easier to get through stages with than a physical team is. Chapter 6 especially is very tough on physical teams, as enemies there have huge amounts of physical resistance with very low amounts of magical resistance. So if you pick a physical team, do note that you will progress more slowly than a magical team will. Both teams are good later, although physical edges out magic in the true late game as of the time that I'm making this video, in February of 2018. Now, it's not by that much, and it very well could be that Vespa, who, unlike a lot of other gacha games, is very willing to buff and nerf heroes, could buff magical teams into the lead again. So don't really worry too much if you prefer a magical team. They're not bad, and they could easily come out on top once again soon in the future. So with that decision in mind, there's really 4 main roles on your team. You've got your DPS, your damage per second, your sub-DPS, your tank, and your healer. So your DPS is your main damage dealer, the one who dominates and destroys the enemy, ripping them apart, turning them to ashes, cinders, whatever. The sub-DPS is the backup damage dealer, who kind of helps the main damage dealer to deal more damage by grouping up enemies for them, enhancing the damage they do, enhancing the amount of damage enemies take, as well as just dealing a good amount of damage on their own. The tank keeps the team safe. The tank is the steady bulwark that keeps the monsters or the other players' units from hitting your own units. And then the healer is the one that keeps the team healthy. The healer is the one that keeps the team from dying, really, and that, for me, is Frey. So, for most teams, having one of each is suggested. Having a balanced team is a pretty good idea early on, and even later on in the game, but you can experiment later on in the game with stuff like a multiple DPS, a healer list, a tank list, multiple healers, or even multiple tank setups later in the game. But early in the game, try to stick to a main DPS, a sub DPS, a tank, and a healer. So when you start the game, you get 4 heroes for free: Roa, Frey, Cleo, and Castle. And then you'll get Klaus right at the end of Chapter 1, so really you get 5. And Klaus is probably the best tank in the game, so feel free to use him forever. Frey is one of the top healers in the game as well, so feel free to use her forever as well. I got her unique weapon, so I just never switched her out. But Roa, Castle, and Cleo are not as good. Now, don't take this as meaning they're bad heroes. Roa is an amazing hero, one of the top physical DPS in the game for single target, late game. Castle is a nightmare in arena if you have a higher starred version of his unique weapon. And Cleo is okay as an AoE damage dealer. She doesn't excel at it because Artemia and Aisha exist, but she's not bad either. However, early game, All three of those require quite a bit of investment, and none of them really excel in the ways that other units will, and they'll kind of drag you down, especially Roi, who everyone keeps telling me is a terrible idea for my first DPS, but I love him so much that I raise him anyways. So really the main choice narrows down to who your main DPS and to a lesser extent your sub DPS will be, especially because tanks and healers are kind of interchangeable. You can change them based on what you want for the team, but Klaus is always going to be a good tank. He's always going to be a steadfast iron wall on the front line that doesn't die as long as he's properly geared. Frey is an amazing shield healer with a great party-wide shield that keeps your entire team safe and from getting crowd controlled, with a very powerful single target heal. Other healers heal in different ways, but for the most part, healers kind of do the same thing, which is keep your team alive, and tanks do the same thing, which is keep your team from getting killed. You'd think those would be the same thing, but they're kind of different. Your main DPS and sub DPS, however, all of them function in different ways. Your main DPS, yes, the main way they function is pew 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 and everything dies, but the way they do this is different, and the type of damage they rely on is either magic or physical, which is a very crucial difference. Sub DPS can be magic or physical, but some sub DPSs amplify magic damage, others amplify physical damage, others bring parties together or enemies teams together so that you can AoE them all at once. Others amplify your team's damage to do more. So really the main DPS and sub DPS are where the main decision for what your team is going to look like lies, especially as an early game player. So for me, my main DPS was Roi, and my sub DPS is Maria. So I'll cover the magical teams first. For magical teams, and let me quickly go to the hero list. So I'll look at the hero list first. I'll show you guys, I haven't used my 2 or 3 star tickets yet. I'll show you guys the heroes available here, and then I'll go to the hero page itself to show you the other ones I'll recommend. So if you're on a budget, you don't want to spend any rubies, you want to use all your rubies to progress, you don't want to use them on a hero, then the best heroes for the magical teams, for the 2 star, for your main DPS, it's Epis right here. And for 3 star, for your main DPS, it's Aisha or Luna. So Epis is a assassin succubus. She's got really good AoE for an assassin. She can dive the backline, which is very useful, especially in a lot of stages in the Tower of Challenge or the Tower of Ordeals, where a powerful healer or archer or wizard will take down your team. Epis can dive them and really just make the stage a lot easier for you. Aisha has a very powerful amount of DPS. She's good at AoE and at single target, but she's not as good as at either one as someone that would be dedicated to it. Luna's kind of similar. She's a jack of all trades with very powerful burst on a decent CD. You can't really go wrong with any of the 3. And there's a 4th one, which is not available on the hero tickets, unfortunately, called Artemia. So if I just go to not applicable here and let you guys listen to the lovely clicking of my mouse. So I go all the way to the right over here. You can see Artemia. Artemia has amazing magical AoE. Like, her magical AoE is absolutely insane. She's not as good single target, but her single target's not bad either, and her AoE is crazy. It makes story farming a breeze. It makes a lot of things a lot easier, especially for a newer player. However, do keep in mind that she's not available on the 2 or 3 star tickets, or the 5 star ticket. Which means if you want Artemia, you'll either have to shell out 6,000 rubies for her, or wait for an event to give you a ticket with Artemia on it, such as the first year anniversary event going on, well, starting in 4 days. So if you want Artemia, you've either got to wait for them to update the newbie tickets. So if you're starting this game and they've updated the newbie tickets, great, but that hasn't happened as of this video. Or if there's an event going on, you can get it from a ticket like that. If the event gives it a ticket that has Artemia as a selectable character in it. Or you can just buy her for 6,000 rubies. But 6,000 rubies, you'll be around chapter 5 by the time you get there, which means you will have to invest a bit in another DPS before you get Artemia. For sub DPS, there's a few good options. Most of them are free, and then the best one is not, which is Priscilla. So I'll cover her first. So Priscilla is crazy good. She is probably the best pure sub DPS in the game. She can group up enemies. She can amplify both physical and magical damage with, I want to say it's skill 2? Yeah. So Priscilla and her allies attack both rise. She does very good damage on her own. She is crazy good. But just like Artemia, she's not available on the tickets, which means you will have to either shell out rubies for her, get her in the Heroes Inn, as she's currently available in the Heroes Inn, but that will take you almost a month to get her. So if you're trying to progress, and you want her on your team, you don't really want to get her from the Heroes Inn. Or just like Artemia, you can get her from an event ticket if the event ticket covers up to Priscilla. However, Priscilla is not the only sub DPS. There are a lot of sub DPS for magical teams. The other three good ones is not Visca. Visca's creepy. Are Annette, Maria, and Lorraine. So Annette is probably the most jack of all trades of them all. She can heal, she can damage, she can amplify magical damage. She can really do it all. She requires a bit of investment to do so, though. However, if you do invest in her, she can actually replace a healer even, as long as your team is survivable enough without a healer. As she can heal, she can really just do it all. She is a great hero, but she's a little more complex than... or complex isn't really the right word. She's a little more resource intensive than the other two sub DPS are, which are Maria and Lorraine. So Maria is a 3-star, Lorraine's a 2-star. So Lorraine is a druid. She has very powerful CC and a poison mechanic, which makes her very powerful over long fights. This doesn't really change much when you're doing the story, but later when you're doing world boss or dragons, Lorraine can start to do some very respectable damage. She's also pretty good in PvP because, especially this skill 3 and her skill 2, are both very powerful skills on fairly lengthy cooldowns, well, at least for skill 3, that can really mess up an enemy team's day. Maria is also pretty good at PvP, but Maria doesn't do very much damage. However, she makes up for it. Actually, I own Maria, that's why she's not there. How Maria makes up for it is she has some of the most crowd control in the game. Every single ability Maria has will apply crowd control. Her first skill has a pushback effect as well as a slowing effect. Her second skill has a snaring effect. Her third skill draws all the enemies together and then stuns them, and her fourth skill lowers the attack of any enemy hit. So really, Maria is absolutely amazing for babysitting your hero, because with all that crowd control, even if your hero's DPS isn't really up to par, your main DPS, because Maria's DPS definitely isn't up to par, she can still, 119 to 120 skill books, that's kind of painful. She can still just kind of prolong the fight long enough, especially if you're using Klaus or Jane as your tank, to let the DPS finish off the fight. So between all four of them, the best one is Priscilla, but Priscilla is definitely not necessary if you don't have the rubies to get her, or there's not an event to give you a ticket for her. And Maria and Lorraine are definitely amazing choices, especially Maria because she just makes the early game so easy. Of course, Maria's problem is that her low DPS isn't very useful later on in the game. It's very useful if you want to keep raising her and use her for arena, but if you want to use her as part of your team going to Chapter 7, where debuffs are cleansed constantly, then she won't do too much for you. But she will make the Tower of Ordeals and the Tower of Challenge a breeze for you, so she has her trade-offs. Lorraine has much better damage, a little less CC, but she still has a lot of CC, and some very respectable showings in stuff such as World Boss. You can't really go wrong with any of them. Really, it's just a personal preference. Maria will make life the easiest early on, but falls off a bit harder later compared to the other three of them. Priscilla will make your life the absolute easiest in general over the course of the game, but is the hardest to obtain as she's not in the free tickets. So, one other thing to note, Priscilla and Maria both have ways to kind of group enemies for AoE attacks. So if you choose Artemia or Aisha, or even Epis, Priscilla and Maria's way of grouping enemies will make their AoE abilities shine even more, as all the enemies will be hit, making clearing stages much easier if you can coordinate those abilities. Also note, if you decide to go with a magical team, that instead of Klaus, you should probably go with the tank that is Jane. Jane is a very powerful tank. She falls off a bit later game, but she just got some buffs to help with that. And she is pretty much a wall. Like, early game, because of this passive Rest in Peace, she is very, very difficult to fully kill, which will make using her on your team very good. She also has magical amplification. Yeah, 25% more magical damage on enemies that she hits with her second skill, which is very spammable. And really, for magical teams, Jane will shine more than Klaus will. Now, Klaus is still an absolute all-star of a tank. It's just Jane will make your magical team do more damage, so she'll let you clear things faster, especially bosses. So those are magical teams. Physical teams are a little more difficult, though, to really classify. Because for physical teams, the main DPS options just aren't as good, and the sub-DPS options are fairly similar. Priscilla, Maria, Lorraine, and instead of Annette, you want to use Philip, but Philip's not really a great sub-DPS. He's more of a tank, although he does amplify physical damage. There are less physical amplifiers in the game than there are magical amplifiers. A brand new one just came into the game, but she, similar to Priscilla, Requina, amplifies both types of damage, I believe. Priscilla, like I already mentioned, is not available in the 2 or 3 star or 5 star tickets, and Maria and Lorraine, while both excellent sub-DPS, are better for magical teams. But Maria CC, as well as Lorraine's CC, are both absolutely superb to have early game, especially because if you choose a physical DPS, you're going to be weaker early game, and being weaker means you need better ways to survive while your DPS takes down the enemies. And the amount of crowd control that Maria and Lorraine bring to the table really helps with that survivability. So for the main DPS for your physical teams, there's actually quite a few. So you've got Roi, he requires a lot of investment, which makes him pretty bad to use early on, because he needs a 100% critical chance to really start to shine, due to how his third skill works. And then you have... so you've got Lacrack, but no one uses him. I'm going to ignore him. You've got Celine, a really good archer. She's not really a jack of all trades, but she does pretty much everything. She's got some AoE, she's got some single target, she does good damage, but not great damage. She's fairly survivable. She's just good at pretty much everything she does. She doesn't really stand out, but she's good, which is good, good. Then you've got Maruru, who early game is better as a sub-DPS. You've got Reyna, who, unless you're a masochist, just don't choose Reyna, or unless you have a lot of love for Reyna's character design. Reyna she's not the worst hero in the game, but she's pretty damn close. She might be the worst hero in the game. I'm not too sure. She's pretty bad right now. She needs some buffs. She needs some serious love from Vespa, honestly. There's Radina, but she's more of a single target, and she has her own issues. Apart from that, there's Fluss, but he's got issues as well. He might even be magical DPS, I can't even think. He's just not good story mode. He's a PvP hero through and through, and he's not even that good in PvP right now. Nyx is probably the only one that can really compete with Celine, as a physical DPS, but Nyx pretty much requires his unique weapon to actually function. If you have Nyx's unique weapon, and especially if you have multiple stars on that unique weapon, Nyx is incredible, especially once you invest in him some more, get him to Transcended. But just like Raw, he does require quite a bit of investment, and until that point, it's going to be a little painful using him to level. Mitra is not bad, but Mitra, where he excels is world bosses. His passive is Your Next, and it's a stackable passive, and it stacks up to 100 times on a single target. What this means is that Mitra loves long fights against single targets, which is not what story mode is. Story mode is 2 to 3 different battles against 4 or 5 targets at a time, which means Mitra's DPS is kind of mediocre until you get to world bosses. He is a world boss champion though, but if you really love Mitra, you can make him work. Another similar hero that isn't on the tickets is Yan. Let me go all the way over here to Yan. She is a dragon specialist, where Mitra is a world boss specialist. She can work. My fiance uses Yan as her main DPS, and it works. But Yan is not available on any of the tickets, unlike Mitra. Mitra is available on your 3-star ticket. And then there's also... So I kind of forgot one main DPS for Magic, and that's not Cassandra. It's Theo. Theo he's a warrior, which usually cannot be a main DPS, but Theo is a bit of an exception in that he can main DPS. And he's incredible at it. He will make the entire story very easy if you have him. Unfortunately, just like with Artemia and Priscilla, he's not available from the tickets. You will have to get him for rubies or from an event. So if you want Theo, he's really cool, he's really powerful, and he can work as your main DPS on a Magic team. Anyways, back to the physical teams. So really, physical teams, kind of the gist of it is pick who you love, because none of them really excel early on. However, a lot of them are really powerful later on. Mitra, absolutely incredible in World Boss, pretty good in Dragons too. Nyx has insane AoE and is a PvP king. His only problem is you do need his unique weapon for him to really shine. Selene is kind of good at everything, but she's not really the best at anything either. Maruru, if you really love her character design, she's like a little lowly pirate here. I mean, she's cute, you know? But she's kind of hard to use as a main DPS at first. She gets better later, but you will want her unique weapon to do more damage, and she's more of a sub DPS than a main DPS as well. So really, physical teams are kind of... It's really, you need to invest in them. They're going to be weaker early on. They've got less clear choices for powerful early game teams. They've got less clear choices for synergy with other heroes in the free hero tickets. If you're a whale and you can go for a team like the healer is Mediana, Priscilla is your sub DPS, Nyx as your main DPS with his unique weapon, and then Klaus as your tank, yes, you will probably murder everything. But I mean, if you're a whale, you can pretty much use whatever team you want and you'll probably be successful. That's Mediana. She's the best healer for physical DPS teams, but she is also not available in the tickets. You will have to get her with rubies, blah, 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 blah. As I've already said a few times. So, really, magical teams, just in general, are suggested as a new player just because they're a lot easier to raise. They're a lot easier to start off with. They've got clearer paths going forward, and it'll get you to late game faster, where that you can then start building up your physical DPS team. So for new players who want to progress as quickly and efficiently as possible, I'd suggest a team of Jane as your tank, Frey as your healer, although she's interchangeable, you can really use any healer you kind of like, Epis, Artemia, Luna, or Theo as your main DPS. You can also use Aisha. And for sub DPS, Lorraine, Maria, Annette, or Priscilla. And if you're dead set on using a physical unit as your main DPS, like I was with Roa, then a different team would be Klaus as the tank, Frey as your healer, once again interchangeable. If you can afford Mediana, go with her, she's better. Your physical DPS unit of choice, for me, Roa. And Priscilla or Maria as your sub DPS. Priscilla is probably better, but Maria is better at protecting your main DPS because she has so much crowd control that it's actually kind of borders on ridiculousness. So I suggest the other advantage of that team is that because Frey and Klaus are both free, as you guys might have noticed, I still have both my 2 and my 3-star unit tickets. I can, once I get my team all fully leveled up and kitted out, I can then start using those tickets to help build secondary teams. I could build a magic team, I could enhance my physical team for dragons, I can do whatever I want. And that's the main advantage to using Klaus and Frey as your tank and your healer. Now, of course, if you don't want to do that, totally feel free to use like the 3-star ticket on Jane and the 5-star ticket on a healer, or even the 2-star ticket on a healer. It's really up to you. And honestly, King's Raid, yes, progression will be a little slower if you go with the units you really like the looks of, or you really dig the lore of. For example, Roi, I could have probably progressed faster with literally any other DPS. But Roi is really cool looking. He looks baller. He's cool as hell. He's got some great skins, although he could use more. Vespa, please. He's just cool all around. And if you really love a unit, then King's Raid, you can make it work no matter what. Except maybe Reyna. I mean, she's just... I'm sorry, Reyna. Reyna lovers, I know. I feel your pain. But I'm sure she'll get buffed eventually. Vespa does want to sell skins, and Reyna is pretty cute. But yeah, so just choose who you like, and then kind of build your team around them. But no matter what, if you're building a magical team, Jayne excels as a tank. For healers, you can really use any of them. And Lorraine, Maria, Annette, and Priscilla are all excellent sub-DPSs for any magical DPS. Then if you're building a physical team, you can just keep Klaus as a tank. He's a great tank for physical teams. He's a great tank for magical teams as well. You can keep Frey as a healer. If you can afford Mediana, go for it. She is the best healer out right now for physical DPS. And Priscilla's probably the best sub-DPS just in general for a physical unit. But in order to just kind of get past early and somewhat mid-game, Maria's crowd control is incredibly good. It's, like, honestly, it's incredibly good. And will make your life a lot easier. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching this video. I know it's kind of a little inconclusive. Choose who you like. It's your own choice. But really, that's what King's Raid is about, just kind of making your team. If you want to be the absolute pinnacle of competitiveness in King's Raid, you'll have to spend money. And in that case, just go for a team of Jayne, whatever healer is currently the best healer. I think it's like Audie right now, or Reffy, one of the two. Artemia as your main DPS, or Theo. And then Priscilla as your sub-DPS. Get them all unique weapons, and you'll probably destroy all content right up until late game, at which point you're a whale. Just outfit whatever amazing endgame team you want with powerful unique weapons and win the game. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, subscribe if you like it, and have a good one.